Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Zurina Atika binti Abdul Jabal, one of the representative of Group 15. We give a presentation on the Business Law MGM 3313 group assignment. Our group consists of 6 members, Nur Fazira Natasha binti Ramlan, Wanur Ain binti Wan Mazlan, Siti Aisyah binti Muhammad Ghazali, Zurina Atika binti Abdul Jabal, which is me, Masra Najwa binti Muhammad Fazli, and lastly Amir Sham bin Nur Azhain. We are assigned to study question 3, which reads, Linda, a factory operator whose husband has recently died and whose only child has been paralyzed and mentally unstable because of a long illness, is very concerned about how she is going to survive and pay the outstanding medical bills. She explained her worries to Ma. We are assigned to study question 3, which reads, Linda, a factory operator whose husband has recently died and whose only child has been paralyzed and mentally unstable because of a long illness, is very concerned about how she is going to survive and pay the outstanding medical bills. She explained her worries to Mahmoud, a friend, who is a successful businessman. Mahmoud runs a financial consultancy service and Linda has sought his advice many times in the past. For example, in relation to the best investment portfolio that Linda should invest her savings. He suggested that she should sell the land she inherited from her mother. The issue here, we need to know whether the contract entered by Linda and Mahmoud considered as voidable contract under undue influence to enter into a contract. The parties' relationship to one another must be such that one is able to control the other's will. A person is considered to be in a position to control another person's will when they have actual or apparent control over them. Maybe they act as their fiduciary, or enter into a contract with them while their mental capacity is temporarily or permanently impaired due to old age, illness, or physical or mental distress. Here we can see that Linda is currently faced with mental distress. Hence, we can conclude that this contract is under undue influence. Legal principle of undue influence contract is when one of the parties is in a position to dominate the will of others and uses that position to obtain an unfair advantage over the other. Trust is the foundation of all current relationships. According to question 3, Linda has financial problems and tells the problem to her buddy who is a businessman named Mahmoud who runs a financial consultancy service. Linda has often demonstrated her trust in her friend by heeding his counsel on the best investment portfolio in which to place her money. Mahmoud, who is in a better position than Linda, overwhelmed her and advised Linda to sell her land to him for 300,000 ringgit. Due to her husband recently died and her child contracted illness, she accepted the offer because she is very worried about her future life and worried if she cannot afford to pay the cost of her child's medical expenses. But after she signed the contract, she found out that the actual price of the land was 600,000 ringgit. Mahmoud actually makes a contract with a person who is permanently affected by mental distress. This shows decisions made by persons in a weak situation are easily influenced by another person. Mahmoud takes use of his position to get an unfair advantage, which is money from a friend who is trusting him, Linda. The Contract Act, 1950. A contract is a written agreement that is enforceable in court, as defined by Section 2B of the Contract Act of 1956. It is a contract that involves two or more parties and is enforceable between them. A voidable contract is one that is enforceable by law at the option of one or more of the parties to an agreement, but not at the option of the other party or parties, according to Section 2(1) of the Contracts of Act of 1950. Free consent is one of the elements in the law of contract. Both parties' consent must be freely given. According to Section 15 of the Contract Act of 1950s, definition of the word consent is two or more parties are considered to consent when they agree upon the same item in the same sense. Section 19(1) of the Contracts Act of 1950 states that if coercion, fraud, or misrepresentation were used to obtain a party's consent to an agreement, that party may choose to void the agreement.
So for Section 16 of 1950 Act, the relationship between the parties to each other must be such that one is in a position to control the will of the other. This is one of the elements of undue influence under Section 16 of the 1950 Act. A person is considered to be in a position to control another person's will if they have actual or apparent control over them. are in a fiduciary relationship with them, or enter into a contract with someone whose mental capacity is temporarily or permanently impaired due to old age, illness, or physical or mental distress. The individual who was in a position to exert excessive influence on another person's will is responsible for demonstrating that his contract was not influenced by such influence. When there is confidential contract between the parties, such as a solicitor-client relationship, the assumption there has been improper interference. So for case, we take a good example of case for Datuk Jaginder Singh and Osvi Tara Rajatnam, 1983. In fact, according to Tara, the registered proprietor, the sale of the land to the buyer was encouraged by deception on undue influence on the part of Datuk Jaginder. In federal court, the transaction between Datuk Jaginder and Tara was unethical because they had a solicitor-client relationship. The honor was on Datuk Jaginder to disprove the interference of improper influence. The plaintiff in this case claimed, among other things, that the first and second defendants who served as her solicitors committed fraud and undue influence when they transferred her land to the second defendant and then to the third defendant. In Hale, a lawyer owed his client a fiduciary duty. The solicitor has a duty to treat his client with rigorous fairness and candor as a result of this connection. Defendant 1 and Defendant 2 were in a position to influence her will to their benefit since they were fiduciaries, the court said. The fiduciary connection test under Section 16(2)(a) of the presumption of influence was used. Furthermore, the contract condition between Tara and Defendant 1 and Defendant 2 were obviously severe and unjust. Second limb of the presumption of undue influence has been established. The responsibility of establishing the contract was not influenced by undue influence is placed on the person in a position to control the other party's will by Section 16(3). Defendant 1 and Defendant 2 had not relieved themselves of their duty. The move to Defendant 3 was therefore cancelled. The Supreme Court also determined that there was fraud because the defendants had no intention to keeping their promises to the plaintiff. Although the transaction was in a form of transfer, the second defendant had falsely represented to the plaintiff that it was simply a security and that the land would be restored to her after a year. Argument. A registered proprietor named Tara claimed she was induced by fraud and undue influence of Datuk Jaginder to transfer the land to the buyer. In federal court, Datuk Jaginder and Tara were in a solicitor-client relationship. The transaction was unconscionable. Burden was on Datuk Jaginder to rebut the presumption of undue influence. The transfer was set aside. This problem is the same as Linda's, who was encouraged by Mahmud's offer to sell the land for RM3,000 to him. According to Tara, the registered proprietor, the sale of the land to the buyer was encouraged by deception and undue influence on the part of Datuk Jaginder. The transaction between Datuk Jaginder and Tara was unethical because they had a solicitor-client relationship. The onus was on Datuk Jaginder to disprove the inference of improper influence. Last but not least, application. So under application, the case is fiduciary, which is parent and child, trustee and beneficiary, agent and principal, partner and other partner, joint venture and other joint venture, promoter of club and club members, and solicitor and client are just a few examples of the relationship that exists between parties. Linda and Mahmud are solicitor and client or trustee and beneficiary. The transaction may be set aside by the victim of undue influence. Linda could win by conclusively demonstrating that the perpetrator improperly used undue influence to persuade him to make the transaction. The court will assume that the wrongdoer, used undue influence to secure the transaction if the victim can show the wrongdoer was in dominant position when they engaged into the said transaction and that it was unfair to the victim. The courts refer to this as actual undue influence since Linda was able to demonstrate the dominant party exerted undue influence to accomplish the contested transaction. Based on this, Linda could really be able to demonstrate that the dominant party exerted undue influence in order to secure the gift or contract. To sum up all the things that we have said, undue influence can occur when two parties have a close, trusting relationship that allows one of them to exert power over the other, even if that power may be entirely normal and appropriate in that relationship. A plaintiff may be forced into a transaction in a more straightforward manner by the influence of the person who was able to exert control over him. The plaintiff may cancel the deal on the basis of undue influence. The case of Linda and Mahmud are very related to the case of Datuk Jaginder Singh and Osby Tara Rajatnam, 1983, where Linda is influenced by Mahmud, who is a financial consultant. Mahmud had influenced Linda to sell her mother's inherited land for Rm 300,000 ringgit when the real price of the land at the time was Rm 600,000 ringgit. This should not be happen and can be avoidable. So that's all from us. Thank you.